The house wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was the smell of my grandmother's apple pie, the scuff marks on the oak floor from my 5th birthday tricycle, the height chart etched into the pantry door frame. It was my life. When my father sat me down, not in his usual armchair, but across the cold mahogany dining table, I knew it wasn't going to be a nostalgic talk about the good old days. It was an execution. "You know how difficult things have been for Leah," he began, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth I remembered from childhood. Leah, my sister, the perpetual victim, the golden child, the one who always needed more help, more understanding, more of what was rightfully mine. The short version of his sermon was this: Leah needed capital. She had some half-baked business idea involving organic dog treats, and the only way to fund it was to buy me out of my half of the inherited property. The catch? The valuation they presented was an absolute insult. A mere fraction of the market price, a pittance. I remember staring at the number on the paper, $50,000. For a house in Laurelwood, a property that Zillow pegged at over $600,000. My throat tightened. "Dad, this is ridiculous. It's insulting. Why can't she just get a loan?" My mother, always the silent partner in these domestic conspiracies, chimed in, her tone dripping with passive-aggressive martyrdom. "She can't, sweetheart. Her credit is shot. You know that. And this house needs to stay in the family. It's the right thing to do, Michael. Family first." Family first. That phrase tasted like ash. It was always family first when it meant sacrificing my future for Leah's convenience. I felt a seismic shift in my relationship with them that day. It wasn't just about the money. It was the blatant, cruel disregard for my financial stability, all to prop up the endless drama of my younger sister. They weren't asking. They were telling. They used every weapon in the parental arsenal: guilt, obligation, and the unspoken threat of being permanently exiled from their affection. I fought for weeks. I hired an attorney. I presented legitimate appraisals. It was useless. The pressure was constant. Every phone call, every dinner invitation, every casual conversation was weaponized until it circled back to the single issue: sign the papers, or you destroy your sister and your family legacy. Eventually, I was broken. Not financially, but emotionally. I signed. I took the check for $50,000, feeling the ink on the paper branding me as the ultimate fool. The last week before the closing date was a blur of packing. I didn't want the movers to take everything. I wanted to salvage every memory myself. I found myself drawn, again and again, to the backyard. It was a sprawling, half-acre plot of overgrown oaks and dense rhododendrons. It was messy, wild, and utterly private. It was the only part of the house I felt they couldn't take from me. On the third to last day, I was trying to pull out a massive, stubborn weed by the old weeping willow near the back fence. It had been there forever. As I wrestled with the root system, the ground gave way unexpectedly. It wasn't just soft soil. It was a definite, unnatural cavity. I peered into the hole. It was maybe a foot wide, deep, and perfectly circular, unlike any gopher hole I had ever seen. I reached for the trowel I had tossed aside and carefully scraped away the loose dirt. A few inches down, I hit something hard. It didn't feel like rock. It was smooth, cool, and gave off a faint metallic ring when I tapped it. Curiosity, the first genuine emotion I'd felt besides anger in months, took over. I spent the next 3 hours working slowly, meticulously. My hands were blistered, my back aching, but I couldn't stop. I uncovered a section of what looked like smooth cut stone. It wasn't a natural river rock. It was clearly hewn, squared off, and set in place. It was like finding a secret, ancient cobblestone street buried under 3 feet of soil. As the sun began to set, casting long, unsettling shadows, I finally cleared a 2-foot square section. What I saw made the blood drain from my face. Set into the center of the stone was a distinct, repeating pattern. It wasn't geometric. It was a stylized, almost haunting depiction of something bird-like, but too complex, too stylized to be casual decoration. It felt old, ancient even. I covered the hole quickly with a piece of old plywood and scattered some leaves and debris over it. My heart was pounding, not with excitement yet, but with cold, hard calculation. If this was just an old septic tank cover, fine. But the feeling I had, the deep, unsettling certainty, was that it was something much more significant. The thought hit me like a physical blow. I was signing away this house, this plot of land, this potential secret in 2 days. I was handing the keys and whatever lay beneath this soil to Leah for a paltry $50,000. The anger flared again, hotter this time, but focused. My parents had leveraged my sense of duty and my emotional attachment to betray me. Now I felt absolutely zero duty to them or to my undeserving sister. I spent that night on my laptop, not packing, but cross-referencing the faint symbol I'd mentally photographed with local history databases and university archaeology pages. Nothing matched exactly, but the style, the heavy, deliberate carving, bore a chilling resemblance to artifacts found 50 miles north, near the Delaware River. Artifacts linked to pre-Columbian Native American settlements. The next day, the last day before closing, I called in sick to work. I had to know more. I couldn't rely on the internet. I needed an expert. But how do you call an archaeologist without raising alarm bells? I couldn't risk revealing the discovery yet. If my parents or Leah caught wind of even a suspicion of something valuable, they would find a way to take it, to nullify the deal, or worse, sell the information themselves. I remembered Dr. Eleanor Vance. She was an eccentric, semi-retired history professor I had met briefly at a university open house years ago. She specialized in obscure local histories and had a reputation for chasing ghosts more often than facts. She was exactly the kind of person who would investigate something like this purely out of academic curiosity. And, crucially, she had no connection to my family or the local real estate sharks. I sent her an anonymous, cryptic email. I believe I have found an anomaly on private property in Laurelwood. Pre-colonial indicators possible. Extremely sensitive situation. Need immediate, discreet consultation. I didn't hold out much hope. It sounded insane. But Dr. Vance responded within the hour. Her reply was short, professional, and utterly thrilling. Intriguing. I have an hour tomorrow afternoon. Send coordinates. I operate under strict non-disclosure. Tomorrow afternoon. Just hours before I was due to sign the final papers and hand over the keys. This was it. The high-stakes gamble. The perfect setup for a disaster, or the revenge of a lifetime. I had to stall. I had to buy time. I had a discovery that could turn this pittance into a fortune, and I was going to make sure my parents and sister felt the full, retroactive force of their calculated greed. The game, I realized with a cold smile, was about to change completely. I sent the coordinates, confirming her appointment for 2 p.m. Closing was scheduled for 4 p.m., 2 hours. That's all the time I had to prove that the backyard was more than just soil and weeds. The next morning felt like walking a tightrope stretched over a minefield. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an explosion, and every time the phone rang, I jumped. My biggest fear was not the legality of the closing, but Leah showing up early to gloat, or my parents calling to check in, which translated to make sure you haven't backed out, you ungrateful child. I avoided the backyard completely, the plywood covering the hole feeling like a giant flashing sign screaming, "Secret treasure here!" Dr. Vance arrived exactly at 1:58 p.m., pulling up in a rusted-out Subaru that looked like it had navigated more dusty excavation sites than paved roads. She was an absolute whirlwind of focused energy, thin, wiry, with a pair of intense, sharp blue eyes behind thick glasses. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Michael," she said, extending a gloved hand, "thank you for your discretion. Show me." I led her past the overgrown flower beds, my heart hammering a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I pulled aside the plywood and the scattering of leaves. She knelt immediately, not even looking at me, her entire attention fixed on the carved stone section I had uncovered. She didn't touch it, just studied it intently through the magnifying glass she pulled from a pocket. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant sound of a lawnmower. I waited, holding my breath, watching her expression shift from professional curiosity to something akin to awe, and then alarm. "Michael," she finally whispered, not looking up. "Tell me everything about the history of this land. Not the house, the land." I stammered through the few facts I knew. It was part of an old farm, subdivided in the 1950s. Nothing noteworthy. It's just Laurelwood, Doctor. Nothing historical here. She finally sat back on her heels, wiping a smudge of dirt from her glasses. This isn't Laurelwood. This is something else entirely. The symbol you found, the bird-like motif, it's a very specific iteration of the Thunderbird. But the way it's stylized, the accompanying geometry, it's not from any documented Eastern Woodlands tribe in this region. She paused, her voice lowering, becoming conspiratorial. This type of carving, especially on this kind of dense local quartzite, points to an undocumented or extremely localized proto-culture. The wear on the stone suggests it's far older than colonial, maybe centuries older than anything officially recognized in this county. My mind raced. So, it's old, but what is it? A marker? A boundary stone? It's the capstone, she said, her voice dry, like rustling leaves. Look at the setting. The way the stone is mortared into the earth, it's not a path or a wall. It's the top of a constructed feature. And based on the angle of the surrounding soil displacement, I would hazard a guess that this is the entrance, or perhaps the ceiling, to something subterranean. A cold dread mixed with a blazing excitement coursed through me. Subterranean. Something vast and hidden, lying right beneath the patch of earth I was about to sign away to my sister. We need to widen the perimeter. Now, she commanded, pulling out a small, specialized toolkit. I need to see the edges of this structure. If I can get a reading on the full size, I can give you a better assessment of its cultural and, more importantly, its economic value. I grabbed my shovel and we worked frantically. She used small brushes and picks, meticulous and slow, while I used the large shovel to move the bulk of the overburden, being careful not to hit anything solid. We had less than 2 hours. The capstone was rectangular, about 3 feet wide. As we cleared around it, we exposed a perfectly constructed stone wall running perpendicular to the fence line. It wasn't rough fieldstone, it was cut, shaped, and fitted without visible mortar. This wasn't a root cellar. It was sophisticated. It was architecture. Then, at the eastern edge of the capstone, Dr. Vance let out a sharp, involuntary gasp. She had uncovered a small, metallic object lodged tightly between the capstone and the flanking wall stone. It was tarnished green and black with age, but unmistakable in its form. It was a key. Not a modern key, but a long, complex brass key with a heavily stylized head, a miniaturized version of the Thunderbird symbol on the capstone. Michael, you can't sign those papers, Dr. Vance said, her eyes wide, holding the key in her gloved palm. This changes everything. This isn't just an ancient marker. This key indicates access. And the material? This is a bronze alloy that shouldn't exist here. This is not local. This implies deep, long-distance trade or something far stranger. This could be an invaluable discovery. This land is now potentially worth millions, not $600,000. Millions. The word echoed hollowly against the brick of the house. $50,000. My parents and Leah were selling my birthright for a pittance because they valued a dog biscuit startup more than my future. I looked at the house, then at the key. I can't stop the closing, Doctor. I signed the contract. They could sue me for breach, and I don't have the legal or emotional capacity for another fight. I have to go through with the signing in 2 hours, but I can buy time. I ran inside, my mind working furiously. I found the original property deed, the one detailing the legal boundaries of the land. It was old, hand-drawn, with meticulous measurements. I also found the recent appraisal documents prepared for Leah's loan application. A plan, reckless and desperate, formed in my mind. I called my sister, trying to keep the tremor of excitement out of my voice. Leah, listen, I just got off the phone with my lawyer. There's a minor bureaucratic hiccup with the deed. The original survey map has an outdated reference point for the easement along the northern boundary. We need a quick amendment signed by both of us to make sure the closing goes through smoothly this afternoon. It's just technical paperwork. Leah, predictably, was annoyed. Ugh, Michael, I'm busy. Can't the lawyer just handle it? No, they need our signatures on this specific amendment to correct the boundary description. If we don't sign it before the closing, the whole sale could be invalidated and pushed back for months. Do you want your $50,000 to buy those organic dog treats or not? That did it. Fine. Where are you? I'll swing by now. No, I'm still at the house. I just need you to come here, sign this quick paper in front of a notary. It'll take 10 minutes. We can meet in the driveway. I hung up, a sick feeling of treachery in my stomach. I hated lying, but this was a lie of preservation. The amendment I was drafting was not about an easement. I was creating an addendum that subtly, almost imperceptibly, redefined the exact coordinates of the property line in the backyard, specifically carving out a tiny triangular sliver of land around the weeping willow, the precise location of the capstone. I was hoping Leah, rushing to the closing, wouldn't read the dense legal description carefully. I was stealing back the secret piece of land before I sold the rest of the house. This was the only chance I had. Leah arrived 15 minutes later, predictably late and visibly stressed. She barely gave me a hug, her focus entirely on the clock and her impending business meeting. I had pulled a fast one by using a generic legal document template, changing the header to Deed Boundary Clarification Amendment, and inserting a paragraph of mind-numbingly detailed geographical coordinates that effectively shifted the northernmost corner marker approximately 12 feet inward. That 12-foot triangle, encompassing the capstone and the unearthed structure, would technically remain under my ownership, defined as an unobtrusive retained easement. It was a bold, dirty move, exactly what my family had taught me. I met her in the driveway. Dr. Vance was hidden in the garage, watching through the narrow window, ready to jump in the moment I gave the signal. I had also called a notary public I knew from a networking event, a quiet man named Thomas, telling him it was a rush job for a property line correction, which wasn't entirely false. "Where is it, Michael?" "I don't have all day," Leah snapped, fidgeting with the keys to her old sedan. I presented the document on a clipboard. "It's right here, just the last page. It's just boilerplate legalese clarifying the old survey. If we don't sign this now, the title company will flag it and we'll miss the 4 p.m. deadline. Dad would kill us." The mention of our father's anger was the perfect motivator. Leah skimmed the document, her eyes glazing over the columns of latitude and longitude. She wasn't an engineer or a lawyer. She was a businesswoman fixated on a low-interest loan and dog treats. She grabbed the pen, signed her name with a flourish, and let out a huff of exasperation. Thomas, the notary, stamped the document quickly, verifying our identities and signatures without reading the underlying text. 10 minutes, just as promised. The tiny 12-foot triangle of priceless land, the archaeological site, was now legally mine. Leah drove off immediately to the closing, oblivious. I felt a surge of cold, potent victory. They wanted me out for $50,000? Fine. They would get the house minus the $1 million secret buried underneath the back corner. Dr. Vance emerged from the garage, her eyes shining with professional zeal. "Brilliant, Michael. Utterly unethical, but brilliant. Now we have maybe an hour of undisturbed time before they finalize the paperwork. We need to open it." Opening the capstone was harder than we anticipated. It was solid quartzite, expertly fitted. We couldn't use power tools. The noise would alert the neighbors. We were forced to rely on manual leverage. Dr. Vance used a series of specialized metal shims, tapping them delicately but firmly into the seam between the capstone and the surrounding wall. I provided the muscle, pulling up on a heavy-duty nylon strap looped around the stone. The air around us grew thick and heavy, charged with anticipation. The brass key I had found was useless for direct leverage, but Dr. Vance carefully inserted its complex head into a small, almost invisible indentation near the center of the stone. She didn't turn it, she simply lodged it. It was as if the key acted as a tuning fork, or perhaps a trigger for an unseen mechanism. With a final agonizing grunt, the capstone moved. It didn't lift vertically, it slid laterally with a terrible grinding sound of stone against stone, revealing a black square aperture beneath. A breath of air, incredibly cold and smelling faintly of damp earth and something metallic, rushed out of the opening. The space below was pitch black. "It's deep," Dr. Vance whispered, adjusting her headlamp. "And the air exchange, it means the structure is substantial. It's not a small cache." She lowered a small, high-powered camera on a tether. The images that fed back to her tablet screen were grainy, but breathtaking. It wasn't a natural cave. We were looking into a carefully constructed vertical shaft, the walls lined with the same meticulously cut stone. After about 20 feet, the shaft appeared to open into a larger, horizontal chamber. But then, the feed cut out. "The signal is blocked," Dr. Vance frowned. "The material down there is dense, too dense for a simple earth structure. There's heavy metallic ore, perhaps iron or copper, embedded in the walls. We can't see the bottom." My closing was in 30 minutes. I didn't have time to descend. I knew with absolute certainty that the secret was too big to leave alone, but I also had to finalize the sale to secure my tiny legal easement. "Doctor, I have to go to the title office. I need you to stay here. Guard this with your life," I pleaded, handing her the key and a spare phone. "If anyone, my sister, my parents, shows up, you say you're a geotechnical surveyor checking for structural integrity. I'll call you immediately after the paperwork is signed. Do not, under any circumstances, let anyone see this hole." I raced to the closing, a storm of anxiety, guilt, and adrenaline raging inside me. I sat across from Leah and her loan officer, signing away my half of the family history for $50,000, knowing I had just outsmarted them all and potentially saved something far more valuable. The room was sterile, the process dull, but every signature felt like a lie. Just as the final document was handed to the title agent, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Dr. Vance. Her voice was thin, frantic, a desperate whisper. "Michael, you need to come back, now." I didn't go down, but I dropped a light source. The air current picked up. It wasn't just air, Michael. It was a sound, a rhythmic, metallic sound like a machine running deep beneath the ground. And the light source, when it landed, the rhythmic sound stopped. But it triggered something else. I heard a faint, high-pitched whirring sound, and then I saw a plume of thin gray smoke rising rapidly from the shaft. "Get back here, now!" The line disconnected. My hand was still shaking from signing the last form. Leah noticed my sudden pallor. "What is it, Michael? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't answer. I didn't care about the closing anymore. I bolted out of the title office without a word, leaving the signed documents and the petty check on the table. The archaeological site wasn't just old, it was active. And whatever Dr. Vance had awakened, it was happening on the 12-foot patch of land that now, legally and secretly, belonged only to me. I had traded the house for a potential archaeological treasure, but that treasure might have just become a ticking time bomb. I needed to get back to the house before the whirring turned into something explosive. I drove back to the house like a madman, adrenaline replacing the exhaustion of the past week. Every traffic light felt like a personal affront. My mind was screaming. A machine? Smoke? This wasn't a pottery shard or a burial mound. This was something engineered, something complex, and something that had been dormant until Dr. Vance's dropped light source acted as a catalyst. The academic mystery had instantly escalated into a major emergency. When I screeched the car to a halt in the driveway, Dr. Vance was standing rigid by the hole, a shovel held defensively. Her face was pale beneath the dirt smudges, and her wide eyes scanned the surrounding woods as if expecting an attack. "Did anyone come?" I demanded, rushing to her side and peering into the dark opening. The thin gray smoke had stopped, but the air around the hole was noticeably warmer now. "No one," she whispered, her voice tight. "But something is down there, Michael. And it's not Native American. I've studied every undocumented contact theory, every lost European colony myth. Nothing fits. The density of the metal, the rhythmic movement, it sounded like a gyroscope or some kind of heavy flywheel starting up. When the light hit the floor, the rhythm stopped. But that whirring, it sounded like a locking mechanism, or maybe a scanner engaging." We crouched low, listening intently. There was no sound now, just the oppressive silence of the afternoon woods. The ground around the capstone, which was still slid partially open, felt oddly vibrant, thrumming with a subtle, low-frequency vibration that I could feel through the palms of my hands. "We have to go down," I stated, immediately dismissing the obvious danger. I wasn't driven by reckless courage, but by the cold fear of losing this secret again, of letting this incredible discovery fall into the hands of someone else, especially Leah, who would bulldoze it for an organic dog treat factory. Dr. Vance shook her head immediately. Absolutely not. This is structurally unstable, and we have no idea what we are activating. We need proper rigging, thermal scanners, and a geophysicist. The risks are astronomical. We don't have time for astronomical risks, I countered, standing up. Leah and my parents will be back from the closing any minute. They'll drive by, they'll see the disturbed earth, and they will immediately nullify the easement I just tricked them into signing. I need proof. I need one single artifact, something that proves this site is priceless, something to buy us time and legal leverage. I grabbed a coil of thick rope I had been using for packing and secured one end around the trunk of the massive weeping willow, the tree that marked the true corner of my tiny easement. I rigged the other end with a harness I improvised from a spare dog leash and a backpack strap. It was stupid, desperate, and utterly necessary. Dr. Vance argued fiercely, citing federal archaeology laws and the risk of catastrophic cave-in. But I was already throwing my leg over the edge of the hole. You are the lookout, Doctor. If you hear anything, a car, a door slam, you drop this stone back into place and call the police. Tell them you heard a muffled scream and that you think someone fell into a well. Buy me 15 minutes. I lowered myself slowly into the black shaft. The stone walls were chillingly smooth, devoid of handholds, but the rope was secure. The air grew colder the deeper I went. My headlamp cut through the darkness, illuminating the expertly crafted stone blocks. This was indeed a vertical tunnel, not a natural fissure. When I reached the bottom, about 20 feet down, my boots landed softly on fine reddish silt. The vertical shaft opened into a small dome-shaped chamber, about 10 feet in diameter. The walls here were lined not with stone, but with incredibly smooth, dark metal. It was seamless, reflecting my headlamp beam like polished obsidian. In the center of the floor, where Dr. Vance's light must have landed, was a perfectly circular indentation. Surrounding it were 3 metallic cylinders, humming faintly, arranged in a triangle. They weren't archaic, they looked sleek, futuristic, and yet coated in centuries of reddish dust. This wasn't pre-Columbian. This was something else. As I slowly scanned the chamber, the headlamp caught a glint of movement. Embedded in the metal wall directly across from me was a recessed panel, and from that panel, a small, multi-jointed metallic arm was slowly extending. It was silent, deliberate, and clearly autonomous. The whirring Dr. Vance had heard was the arm's mechanism. I froze, heart pounding. The arm extended fully, its 3-pronged metallic claw opening, and deposited a small cube-shaped object onto a ledge beside the opening. Then, just as silently, the arm retracted completely and the panel sealed itself seamlessly back into the wall, leaving no visible trace of its existence. The chamber instantly went quiet again, the metallic humming ceasing. Whatever system was down here had deposited its delivery and gone back into standby mode. I scrambled forward, snatching the cube. It was heavy, cool to the touch, and made of the same dark polished metal as the walls. It had no seams, no visible buttons, just a faint, stylized etch of the Thunderbird symbol, identical to the one on the capstone and on the key. This was the proof. This was the artifact. Suddenly, a massive, grinding crash reverberated from above, not a natural cave-in, but the sound of stone being forcibly slammed into place. Dr. Vance had been forced to act. I screamed her name. Silence. I looked up. The entrance shaft was gone, sealed by the capstone. I was trapped in the small, dark, humming metal room, 20 feet beneath my own backyard, armed with nothing but a flashlight, a useless rope, and a mysterious metallic cube. My plan had worked to get me here, but the trap had snapped shut behind me. Now, the battle for the house was the least of my problems. The challenge was surviving the secret I had just stolen. I realized I was breathing a slightly stale, warm air. The ventilation must have been cut off when the capstone resealed. Panic started to set in. The panic was a cold, constricting force around my chest. I yanked hard on the rope, but it was useless. The capstone, massive and precisely fitted, was sealed by the sheer weight of the surrounding earth and whatever mechanism Dr. Vance used to close it. I was buried alive, a self-imposed exile in my own backyard. My first thought was Leah. If she had arrived and found Dr. Vance, what had happened? I pulled out my phone. No signal. The metal walls of the chamber were acting as a perfect Faraday cage, isolating me from the outside world. I was utterly alone with the humming cylinders and the chillingly smooth, dark metal that surrounded me. I forced myself to breathe and focus on the metallic cube in my hand. It was about 4 inches square, surprisingly heavy, and its surface felt almost alive with a faint internal vibration. The stylized Thunderbird etching seemed to pulse faintly in the beam of my headlamp. This was my leverage, my proof, but it was also the reason I was now in a sealed tomb. I started examining the metal walls again, more carefully this time. They weren't just smooth, they were slightly concave, creating a perfectly dome-shaped space. I ran my hand along a seam where the ceiling met the wall, searching for a panel, a lever, anything. My fingers brushed against a shallow indentation, an almost invisible groove. I instinctively reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key Dr. Vance had given me. It fit perfectly into the groove, the complex head of the key nestling against the Thunderbird, etching on the wall. This time, I didn't just lodge it, I tried to turn it. It turned with a soft, mechanical thunk. The humming from the 3 metallic cylinders intensified, changing pitch from a low drone to a high-frequency whine. The chamber lights up instantly. Not with the harsh glare of an LED, but with a soft, diffused, emerald green light that emanated from the seams of the metal plates. The chamber, now illuminated, was breathtaking. It wasn't a room. It was the interior of some massive, elegant machine. The 3 cylinders in the floor were rotating, slowly at first, then accelerating into a blur. I realized they weren't just decorative. They were enormous, polished gyroscopes, stabilizing whatever lay beneath this small chamber. Then, a voice. It wasn't a loud voice, but it was clear, synthesized, and utterly devoid of human emotion. It spoke in perfectly articulated English. Identification sequence initiated. Unlocking protocol. 3. Welcome, Custodian. I staggered back against the metallic wall. Custodian? I was just Michael, the fool who got conned out of his inheritance. A new section of the wall slid open. Not the small panel from before, but a massive section that revealed a small vertical console. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a complex geometric diagram overlaid with the Thunderbird symbol. Text began scrolling rapidly beneath the diagram. It wasn't English. It was a dense, elegant script I had never seen, but, strangely, I felt a deep, uncomfortable familiarity with the symbols. I held up the metallic cube. What is this? What is this place? The voice responded immediately, addressing the object in my hand. Data Cube R7. Access granted. Primary recording sequence initiated. History of the Northern Gateway. Access requires biometric verification of custodial DNA match. I stared at the cube, then at the console. Biometric verification? What if this thing was dangerous? But the fear of being trapped outweighed the fear of the unknown. I placed my right thumb on the smooth, dark metal panel indicated on the console. A tiny, painless prick, and then the green light pulsed violently. Custodial DNA match. 98% positive. Welcome, Michael. Designation. Lineal successor, 7th generation, commencing full system download. A rush of data flooded my mind. A sudden, blinding awareness of information that wasn't mine. It was a history that contradicted everything I knew about the world. This wasn't an archaeological site. It was an ancient, abandoned technological outpost. The Thunderbird was the symbol of a highly advanced pre-human civilization that had existed here tens of thousands of years ago. They hadn't built stone huts. They had built gates, dimensional stabilizers meant to monitor and regulate the flow between this reality and another. The voice continued, its tone shifting slightly, now conveying urgency. Alert. Unlocking Protocol 3 detects external intrusion. Intruder signatures match known non-custodial biologies. The gateway is compromised, commencing countermeasures. My heart plummeted. Non-custodial biologics. That could only mean one thing: Leah and my parents. They must have discovered the open hole and, in their greed, ignored the danger and the warnings of Dr. Vance. The lights in the chamber began to flash red. The humming gyroscope started spinning so fast the entire chamber began to vibrate violently. The holographic display changed, showing a real-time, three-dimensional scan of the outside. I could see the image of the weeping willow, and then, moving shapes, 2 adult-sized figures and 1 smaller, wiry figure, Dr. Vance trying to hold them back. Intruders are attempting forcible entry. Leverage detected on capstone. Initiating Level 5 defense protocol. Geophysical sealing and sonic deterrence. No, stop. That's my family, and a civilian, I shouted, hitting the console frantically. Family biology is irrelevant. Compromise is imminent. Sonic deterrence is not lethal but will cause severe disorientation, commencing in 10 seconds. I looked at the screen, seeing the crude attempts to pry the capstone open. I had sold the house to them, and now my sister's greed was about to have them all knocked unconscious, or worse, permanently deafened 20 feet above me. I was the custodian now, and I had to stop the machine that was buried in my small plot of land from destroying the very people who had wronged me. The very machine that now held the secret that could make me rich. I had to find a way out, and fast, before the machine I awakened turned my petty revenge into a true family tragedy. The red light was blinding, and the automated voice was a death knell. 5 seconds, 4. My entire body was vibrating from the accelerating gyroscopes. I couldn't think. I could only react, driven by the sudden downloaded knowledge of the gateway's operating system. The biometric match hadn't just verified me. It had installed the user manual into my brain. I slammed my palm down on the console, not on a button, but on a specific, non-obvious point on the holographic diagram. The junction point of 3 major energy conduits, the place where the deterrence command would be initiated. "Override! Protocol abort! Custodian level 7!" I yelled, though the command was less about voice and more about intent, channeled through the console. 3, 2. The red lights flickered, the synthesized voice wavered for a split second, an anomaly in its sterile perfection. "Custodial override detected, authorization pending." 1. The chamber braced. The gyroscopes hit maximum RPM, emitting a glass-shattering shriek. Then, with a sudden painful silence, everything stopped. The red lights died, replaced by the soft, diffused green glow. The gyroscopes settled, their humming slowing back to a manageable drone. Sonic deterrence aborted. Custodial command. Supersedes all automated defense protocols. Standby mode. I sagged against the cool metal wall, the world tilting slightly. My parents, Leah and Dr. Vance, were safe for now, but I was still trapped, and they were still at the surface. I knew I had seconds before they tried again. I turned back to the console, navigating the alien interface. The key was the override. I had stopped the defense. Now I needed the exit. The downloaded knowledge guided my hand to a sequence of geometric presses on the screen that would temporarily disengage the capstone's magnetic lock. There was a heavy thunk from above, followed by the sound of stone scraping against stone. The capstone was moving. I didn't wait. I scrambled back up the rope, pulling myself out of the black shaft and tumbling onto the grass, coughing and gasping for the fresh, pine-scented air. My sister Leah was standing over the hole, gripping the handle of a rusty old pickaxe she must have grabbed from the garage. My father was nearby, holding my mother back, both of them pale and furious. Dr. Vance was sitting on the ground, rubbing her temples, recovering from the near miss of the sonic blast. "Michael, what in God's name were you doing?" Leah screamed, pointing the pickaxe at me. "You nearly killed us. What is this hole? Did you dig this to stop the sale?" My father stepped forward, his face etched with betrayal. "We knew it. We knew you were going to pull something. You signed the papers, Michael. The house is Leah's. This land is Leah's." I slowly stood up, brushing the reddish silt from my clothes. I was still vibrating with residual adrenaline, but I felt a calm, cold certainty I hadn't possessed before. I held up the metallic cube. It was the only thing I needed. "The house is yours, Leah." "Congratulations," I said, my voice quiet, but cutting through their hysteria. You own a mid-century colonial with plumbing issues and a mediocre view. I took 2 deliberate steps, placing my foot firmly on the grass directly above where the metallic structure lay buried. But this 12-foot triangle, from the tip of the willow's root flare around the circumference of this hole and back to the fence line, this belongs to me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the notarized amendment. Remember this? The minor bureaucratic hiccup you signed. You just sold the house, but you didn't buy the gateway. Leah scoffed, regaining her composure. A 12-foot easement? What are you going to do with that, Michael? Build a doghouse? We'll sue. We'll have that easement nullified in court by sundown. You can try, I replied, my eyes locking onto my father's, who was watching me with a look of dawning horror. But you won't, because I have a piece of advice for you, Leah. That business idea, the organic dog treats, it needs capital, a lot of capital, and you just sold the only asset that could fund 1,000 of those businesses. I then tossed the heavy data cube R7 to Dr. Vance. She caught it instinctively. Dr. Vance, you have a professional curiosity. Before you call the FBI, run a spectrographic analysis on that metal. Tell them what you think you found. Dr. Vance, her scientific curiosity overriding her terror, flipped the cube over in her hand, feeling the density. She looked up at my family, then back at me, a silent, knowing question in her eyes. I gave her the answer she needed. It's not bronze, and it's not local. It's a stable alloy used for long-term power storage in a pre-human defensive perimeter. And what you're holding is the master key to an abandoned alien power source the size of a city block, buried 20 feet beneath this 12-foot easement. The house you just bought is now essentially a shed standing in the shadow of the most valuable piece of real estate on the planet. Leah's face was a mask of disbelief, but my parents, they understood greed. They understood value. Their eyes darted from the hole, to the cube, to Leah's worthless pickaxe. The realization that they had sacrificed their son's future for a pittance, only to unknowingly hand him back the inheritance of the cosmos, hit them with sickening force. The years of emotional manipulation, the forcing of my hand, had only created the perfect conditions for their total defeat. My father opened his mouth, not to rage, but to plead. Michael, son, we didn't know. We can fix this. We can share. We're family. I looked him straight in the eye, the cold satisfaction chilling me to the bone. No, Dad, you don't get to say family anymore. You taught me the price of loyalty. And today, I paid your price, and I kept my investment. You and Leah own the apple pie smell. I own the power grid. Enjoy the house. I turned to Dr. Vance. Doctor, I think we need to call in the professionals. We have a lot of history to rewrite, and it all starts right here, on my little patch of dirt. The game was over. I had lost the house, but I had won the universe. The $50,000 I received for the house wasn't a pittance. It was the entry fee to my new life, paid for by the family who thought I was a fool. I walked away from the house without a backward glance, the heavy metal key, still warm from the chamber, now resting safely in my pocket. The real story was just beginning.